This journey starts with a flight west from Anchorage over the Alaska Range to the village of Bethel, the largest of the native settlements along the Kuskokwim River. Then further northwest up to the village of Chivak, and 3 hours downstream by boat we arrive at the camp. The camp is right on the edge of the river and, like I said, very close to the sea. Just a little bit of an elevated area, which is very hard to find out here, most of it being very low. And as usual, there's Brant feeding right nearby. The camp is located on a little bit of a raised area in the tundra, and this is a favorite of the birds as they take breaks from incubation and fly there to feed. The birds have become quite habituated to the camp being there and probably use it as a landmark, I'm sure. They come in and feed around the tents quite often. This little bit of a raised area seems to grow some of the better vegetation early in the season. It gives them a great area to come to. And of course it is the land of the midnight sun. This is, I'm sure, 11, 12 o'clock at night as the sun dips close to the horizon, but never actually does seem to set. It's a beautiful calm out over the river, and when you first get there you think it's going to last, but sometimes it doesn't. As we start to look around, there's many species of waterfowl in the area, and we'll take a little tour here and run into some of those other species, such as these common Pacific race-eaters. And the hens are nesting quite a bit around the area. Most of them are very, very stalwart on the nest, pointing into the wind and sitting there absolutely motionless. Although most of the males were gone by this stage of late incubation, you did see a few of the drakes left around. A few of the spectacled drakes were nearby the hens. And I had really good luck timing on this one. I bumped into this hen as I was walking back to camp, and she was pretty irritated with me, and then I noticed why. Here was her nest with a beautiful clutch of 6 eggs that were all either hatching or pipped. Another goose species that was in the area was these emperor geese. A little bit more solitary and just real random. Here and there you'd find a pair nesting, but real nice sight to see, something that we don't get to see down here in the lower 48. These guys were about everywhere, and you didn't even need to see them to know they were there, as they keep up a constant chatter. Also some cackling geese around nesting. They're again pretty scattered and kind of solitary pairs here and there. Another bird that we do see some down here in the wintertime, but the big difference being that we don't see them in this beautiful breeding plumage like in the spring up here in Alaska. Not exactly the most graceful bird in the air or during a landing, but once they get on the water in front of you and briefly get into the sunshine at times, beautiful, beautiful plumage on these birds. Another one we might see down here in the wintertime with the identification being by the upturned bill, a real stalwart field mark of this bird. But there again, in the wintertime, they're in a real drab plumage. These guys were all about camp and always scurrying around, real busy. And you'd see them feeding, especially on the riverbank here along the channel. As the tide would drop, sometimes there would be eggs on the mud here from some kind of fish or smelt or herring or something. And this gal was nesting right near one of the tents, or probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to film these chicks. These are the most delicate, cute little creatures that just seem like you wondered how they survived in this harsh world, but they were busy and kind of fumbling around, weren't sure whether to leave the nest or not. Dunlin, another bird we see down here a lot, passing through in the winter and spring, but there again we don't get to see it in the breeding plumage, and also with any kind of courtship display like this. It's the first time I've ever seen this. And these birds were always probably the high-speed feeders of the group. Usually when you look at birds, their wings are blurring to you, but this guy, his head was almost in a blur most of the time. And only got to see one red phalarope, but man, just a beautiful bird. Very, very colorful. Long spurs around, and Savannah sparrow here that would sit on the tent, and you can tell by the marks there that he does it quite often. Here's the guys ready to go to work, headed out. Jim and Sean and Patrick walking with camp in the background there. Tidal changes were sometimes an obstacle. You can see the boat going by there in the front, how low the water is. Chris starting his work here out in the nesting colony. He's identifying parents and pairs of nests here with the scope. And many of these birds already have leg bands from previous years, so they know who the pairs are together. They know the age of the goslings that result from them, and sometimes generations of this information that's all been put together over many, many years. And so this has gotten to a real detailed state with a lot of collaboration between students and years of record keeping. Take a look at how close they are here to the Bering Sea. The tide comes in, a lot of these areas have water all the way around them, just barely above the high water mark. Here's Chris working on a gosling just going to hatch. A lot of times they install web tags in the goslings before they're even out of the egg, which has worked very well. This again leads to a big advantage when it comes to gathering information. Many nests here in very close proximity. Here's more parts of the colony. A hen just settling back on her nest right there, getting situated. Gulls and turnstones mixed in with the brant. A lot of these Sabin's gulls are actually nesting right in amongst the brant. Here's a beautiful hen showing off her bare breast patch there. This is where they actually pluck the down from that lines the nest and insulates the eggs. This shows how close the birds can nest to each other, at times just a few feet. This is probably a dump nest where more than one female laid eggs in this nest, because usually 4 to 6 is about the average clutch size. showing the strong pair bonds here. The ganders a lot of times sitting right next to their female, trying to defend the nest, defend her. Sometimes a different strategy involved here too. And in these areas where there's not much cover, it seemed like the gander was sitting right by the nest. It's like they figured everybody knew she was there. In other areas, sometimes where the grass is taller, there's better cover. The gander would be 20, 30 yards away, like he didn't want to point out where she was, like there might be a chance that we would walk right by her. She was more hidden in the taller vegetation. When you approach the gals on the nest, they usually back off a few feet, and then as you stand there and work and then maybe get ready to leave, they want to crawl or sneak back onto the eggs real quick as they can to get back on them and cover them again. There's a gull eating an egg right in the middle of the screen there, just to the right now. And there again, another thick part of the colony, very close to the edge of the water. It was easy to spot the predated nests, as the down would be in puffs like this, blowing across the tundra or trying to. And then sometimes you would see actual eggs laying around that have been poked full of holes by gulls. And as you were trying to do your work, the gulls were always there to help. And then sometimes even make a deposit on the lens for you. Luckily, they're more beautiful looking than their behavior is. Kind of the intermediate size gull of the bunch. And here's the big guy, the glaucus. Really a large bird, probably a fair amount bigger than a brant. They would often be on these little tiny islands or humps like this, nesting. Often they would be nesting right next to brant like this, and as long as they were on the ground, it would seem to be a peaceful situation. But I'll show you a little something different than that in a minute. Here's what would happen when the gulls would start flying and the brant would sometimes be in the air or vice versa, and it would just develop into this big turf war. And just whoever was up in the air would attack the one down below. Here's glaucus chicks, hunkered down in the nest from the wind. Probably 1 day old. Look like another egg just gonna hatch there. Quite a beautiful gull when they weren't attacking you. And the Jaegers would be out on the tundra and doing this just constantly. These takeoffs and landings, I don't know if it was a hunting strategy or just for fun or what it was, but you would see them doing this practically non-stop. Although we didn't see a fox, we did see a little bit of evidence. Some paw prints here and there. There is a lot of predation. It's part of the natural game on the breeding grounds. And here's a carcass of a bird that got, I don't know if it died or got killed. But banding records revealed this bird to be 19 years old. I caught this girl so I can swab her for avian influenza. And I might even replace this band here. It's getting a lot of wear in it. It's a pretty old band. See the big notch? Also, she's got like a broken toe on this side. That middle toe sticks up like that all the time. We've been waiting and waiting, and finally the hatching begins. This is about the first gosling I saw. And a lot of times we put numbers on the eggs trying to guess the order they were laid in to see if they would hatch in that order. Some goslings there too, just starting to come out. These little ones will come right towards you looking for any kind of friendship or shelter. At times you'd run into these lost goslings out on the tundra, wet and cold, and obviously not going to last much longer. But it's just part of the natural process out here. Something that happens every day. It's kind of a sad thing to witness. Here's another one here in quite a bit better shape. This guy could end up out in the water and actually get back with a brood out there if he's lucky. There's some other goslings aren't so lucky, and there's a lot of predation going on. Many times I saw nests like this with heads of goslings left beside them. The gulls clip the heads off. But then you do see broods like this that actually made it and headed out on the water. Little ones paddling a mile a minute. And then there's the weather that a lot of times went from bad to worse. But work had to get done, and guys would continue going out every day as long as we could. And it was peak of the hatch right now, so we were trying to get as many birds banded and recorded as possible. And then the two big tents here were the cooking and the main storage for food and equipment. The far little building there is the sauna. And then the sleep tents were scattered around different areas on the tundra. The snorers had the faraway tents. And the snowmobile here and the sled, that's how I bring it right down across the tundra on top of the ice. Here's the pintail that was nesting in camp, very close to one of the tents. Okay, we're going to move forward now till banding mode in late July. And here's the boys starting to work on some of the bands and get them ready to go. There's a lot of prep work involved, where they spread the bands off these strings and then put them on these poles in number order, so they're real easy to get off and get on the birds quickly out in the field. There's a close-up of the bands, all of them from Fish and Wildlife Service. And here's Chris, the master band chef, cooking bands in the oven. These bands come flat, these plastic ones come flat, and then he ends up cooking them, heating them up, and rolling them around a bolt to form the round part that goes around the bird's leg. And then those bands have to be put in order and further strung and ready for the field work the next day or somewhere down the line also. Here's Jim in charge of laying out the strategy for the banding drives, and he's got the maps, and he's got the whole gamut about where we're going to drop people off and where we're going to tell them to go and bring the birds. And so here we are on day one of banding. We're starting to load the boats full of gear, and there's a lot to take along. And we got people along with us that are going to be sampling for bird flu. And so it's a lot of stuff to get in the boats. And it's when the tide's low like this, it's a little bit extra work just to get down to where the boats are. Get up and down out of the riverbank there. Loading the nets for the capture pens. Sometimes when you come out in the morning, the boats are a ways from the water. You have to push them down to get them in the channel. And so here we are headed downstream to go to the first drive. There again, something Jim's laid out on a map and told us what the strategy is going to be. Of course, when we get there, you're anticipating where the water is going to be, the water level and the tide. Sometimes you run into a little bit of a dead end problem when you're trying to go up these side channels. So we get up here when there's enough water to wait for the tide to come in a little bit more, and you get up some of these narrow channels to the end and try to drop off some people so you can get them in and around the birds. Here's the beginning of a drive. You can see the people that were just dropped off are running out there to their starting position. There's people in the distance there that were already dropped off around the other side by the other boat. And what we're trying to do is just form a big circle around a large area of the tundra and start walking together and bring the birds with us. And we're anticipating there's birds out here in the grass, although you can't really see them at this point. And as you get closer together, just magically they begin to appear. And this is some kind of Black Brant magic or something, the way they just come out of the grass from what looks to be nothing. It just comes alive with birds. It's pretty amazing. So here we are gathering, bringing them toward the river, toward the water. That way we can get close to where the boats are and unload the gear and set up the traps. And we get more and more people around them here. We'll get them in a tighter ball or tighter group. And get a good look at the birds up close here. And it's really a loud chatter when you get them up close there and get them all gathered together. And anybody that doesn't think the mothers know the goslings, watch this. This hen comes running out of the flock to reclaim her brood right there. Pretty amazing. I don't know if they were all hers or not, but boy, she knew that some of them were, without a doubt. And it's amazing the way they know each other by vocal sounds and these big bunches of birds. A real great example of the imprinting that goes on from goslings to parents. So it's time to unload the gear out of the boats and bring it up on the grassy areas here and set up the traps to drive the birds into. They're again at the job getting this stuff up the muddy banks, and we want to pick out an area up above on the grass to set up the traps for comfort of the birds. They're going to be in here for a couple, 3 hours, and we don't want them getting any muddier and dirtier than they have to. So with the trap set up, it's time to move the birds over and actually drive them into the trap. Sometimes you have to move them across channels of water and sloughs and different things. And here we are putting them in. And in this case, we've got a large flock of birds, so Jim actually divided them in half there, and we put the half in each trap. That way it's not so crowded. This is actually a different drive. I got 3 or 4 different examples here of drives we operated on. There's one wayward bird getting tracked down by John in hot pursuit. And here's another group of birds getting divided up right as they go into the trap. And another nice large flock of birds here. So we've got the birds holding in the traps, and there's camp in the background. And it's time to get things set up for banding and start the process. And this gets to be pretty hectic and a lot going on. It gets to be a real operation there. And to start off with here, Jim's given a little bit of Brant sex education. So the girls are paying close attention.
Once in a while, you get a female where that's
and
kind of big.
Some of the more experienced guys on the other end have already been through that many years ago. Usually start with the goslings and get them taken care of right away, and so they can get back out and relax and start feeding. Here's Chris figuring out some measurements on the caliper. A lot of data recording going on, a lot of measurements, tarsus and culmen and weights and different things all recorded. Mandy holding a band there in her lip. I hope she isn't trying to start a new fad or something, but anyway, here's the banding kit with all the supplies and some of the tools that are used. There's John getting some bands ready ready to go for Chris. He's got his scale in front of him there with the red coffee can on it. Digital scale to weigh the goslings. And those poles you see at an angle, they have the bands on them that were worked on in the tents. And here's the books with all the data recording going on. Many pieces of information in there. The goslings are in the trap there, and a lot of them are at the 6 to 7 week stage where they're going right from the downy part to the feather part. Some of them look a little odd in their outfits. And then this little guy here, these are some of the youngest ones in there, probably about a 3-week gosling here. He's totally oblivious to what's going on. All he's concerned about is keeping eating so he can catch up to the other ones in growth. And this guy here, he's got it figured out. He's going to relax and eat at the same time, so he's doing it sitting down. Definitely a multitasker. But the goslings are so relaxed and always just worried about eating or above everything else. Comparing different stages of molt, the bird on the left was almost grown out again, ready to fly, while the other one had just starting to sprout feathers.